Welcome to Fundraising Good Times. My name is Pearl Shaw, president of Saad&Shaw. Today I'm joined by Melvin Shaw, the founder of Saad&Shaw, and by Bob Fockler, president of the Community Foundation of Greater Memphis. Today we'll be talking about response funding to COVID-19 and community response to the Black Lives Movement and the push for policing changes. So without further ado, let's start our conversation. Bob, when we started talking, the biggest news was COVID-19.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe you'd share with us, how is it that the Community Foundation has come to take a lead role in our community, bringing people together? Just share that story for us.
Well, literally the way it started was mid-March, just as things were starting to fall apart, I guess. I got a call from Doug McGowan, the chief operating officer of the city. I was on a Sunday afternoon and said, you know, the city and the county were aware of kind of the storm that was coming, definitely ahead of the game, and said that they knew that government couldn't be the sole respondent to the crisis. And they really wanted to raise private dollars to help meet the needs of the community. So they asked if the Community Foundation would be willing to help raise private dollars to address the needs of citizens that were going to be affected most directly by the crisis. We did that. We scrambled around and within a couple of days got the Mid-South COVID-19 Regional Response Fund up and running. We did it on a purely collaborative basis from day one. So we pulled into the boat with us not only city and county government, but United Way of the Mid-South and Momentum Nonprofit Partners. The purpose of them, the two of them, they obviously have their ear to the ground and are very close to what the agencies are seeing in terms of need, and they've been a very important resource for that. So that's where it came from. We kind of threw the doors open and started asking our donors at the Community Foundation. We have about 1,000 families that we serve with their charitable needs, but we made a broader ask to the community as well.
Great. Well, would you share with us a little bit, how much money have you ended up raising, and how are those funds being moved into the community?
Yeah, we actually took a pretty philosophical view, and we studied what other cities had done in similar disasters or crises. We looked at what New Orleans did with Katrina. We saw what people on the West Coast were doing with the COVID-19 crisis, since they were dealing with it a little bit sooner than we were. To start with, we didn't know how much we were going to raise. We didn't know how much money we were going to need. We knew that any money we raised could very usefully be put to work on the streets of Memphis and the Mid-South. So we were more concerned with how than the how much originally. We've done this in two phases. So and again, looking at what other cities have done, the money that we raised, we're devoting 60% of it to immediate response, to immediately serve the needs of the folks that were hurting the most. And we looked at the sensitive populations, people that were housing insecure, people that were food insecure, people that didn't have adequate health insurance that were going to be most subject to kind of the storm that was coming. In the process, we've been very aggressive in marketing the fund through partners and through social media, through the press has been very supportive. As of right now, we're 12 weeks into this process. We've raised a little over $4 million, $4,010,000. And we've immediately put back out on the streets more than 2.4 million of that. So that's the original 60%. We've been holding back 40%. And this is sort of a lesson learned from other cities, that even after the storm subsides, there's kind of the mess to clean up, and that mess is really about rebuilding the infrastructure of agencies that we're meeting these needs, meeting the needs of the individuals, and obviously suffering some of the negative impacts of the economy as well. So we spent 60% immediately. We're holding back 40% for recovery and resiliency. And by the way, we are kicking that off pretty much right now. During the summer, we're working with our partners and the advisory team, which is the City and County United Way and Momentum Nonprofit Partners, to figure out what the most effective way of addressing the resilience and recovery phase, basically trying to put together, clean up the mess, help the agencies that have been harmed.
Great.
Bob, I'd like to ask you, I've been hearing that you guys have developed an investment principles for the foundation.
Yes.
Can you tell me how that all started and what was your process and where are you today with that?
Yeah, and the COVID-19 fund, it sort of informs a lot of that, although when we started putting together our community investment principles, we didn't really understand how things like responding to the COVID crisis would fit into this. Our longstanding mission for the Community Foundation is to strengthen our community through philanthropy. And we elaborated on that a couple of years ago to say, well, what does that mean? And we do that by managing charitable funds. I mentioned the 1,000 families that we work with. So managing charitable funds, actively addressing the needs of the community, which is primarily understanding the needs of the community and educating the community, including our donors, on what those needs are. We have had our own discretionary funds, but those funds have been very, very small. And I'll get to that in a second. That's another way for us to directly address the needs of the community. And then the third leg of our mission statement is encouraging philanthropy in all its forms. And that's just encouraging everybody to think about the community and invest their dollars in the community appropriately. And that's a very easy task here in Memphis, since Memphis is so generous. But as our board looked a year and a half or 2 years ago and thought that the Community Foundation could be more effective in addressing the needs of the community by having more of its own funds. So we were getting ready to appeal to the broader community and to our philanthropic partners to build a permanent endowment that would provide a perpetual source of community-based investments, community-based grant making. But in order to do that, we took a step back and said, what are our principles? What's going to be guiding that grant making going forward? We spent several months last year, at the end of last year, holding community meetings, sort of hearing what the community thought we should be doing, what the community's needs were. And actually what came out of that was a pretty strong statement about equity. And I'm just gonna read the vision statement from our community investment principles, which was adopted before all these things started to happen in our most recent months. But our vision statement for our community investment principle says, we'll create a just and equitable region where all individuals and groups receive the resources and opportunities they need to reach their full potential, where identity and geography do not determine their outcomes. We'll build a community where everyone is welcome, valued, resourced, and informed, one where people can easily access opportunities to contribute and thrive. And again, the force of that was really around because of where you live or because of what you look like shouldn't affect your outcomes. Everybody should have equal opportunities to grow, contribute, thrive, and participate in our broader society. The same kinds of things that we're all talking about now as a result of what's been happening in the world. So it came from that as a statement to the community to raise this new endowment. Obviously today, given where the economy is and what's going on in the world, we're not going to be launching a capital campaign to build this endowment today. But we will be coming back to it, and we'll be coming back to it with these same values. So it is about creating a just and equitable region.
Bob, how much would you like to raise for the endowment?
I would like it to be the largest endowed source of philanthropy in Memphis in the Mid-South. That eventually would be, more than $500 million. We're not going to start there. We're not going to, raise $500 million anytime soon. But I would like to see us to be the greatest source of grant making in the Mid-South, and there's a reason for that. We are blessed with great private foundations in this area, and I don't know where we would be without their investments. But their investments are guided by a few individuals and families as they're empowered to do. But I think that there's the view that a broader voice needs to be heard in community grant making, that where private foundations invest their funds may not be where all of us would like to see greater investment. So the community foundations grant making has always been community based, drawn from volunteers, not from staff or a couple individuals. Our grant committees are 15 to 20 people that look like Memphis, and those are the folks that we want to be making these decisions going forward.
Great.
Well, that's great news. Thank you for sharing that and that focus. And I guess that leads us to the question: what changes, if any, are you seeing now, or is it too early to see any changes in people's giving patterns or how they're thinking about their philanthropy?
Well, there's certainly huge change in the short-term giving. It'll be interesting to see what changes there are in long-term giving. Memphians, as I said, and as we all know, are incredibly generous. And when they see a problem, they will step up and they will write checks, and they will hand out food. They will do whatever is necessary to make their neighbors safer or more comfortable. And that's certainly what we've been seeing in the short run. Again, the community support for the COVID-19 Regional Response Fund has been huge. About $1.5 million came from regular people of the 4 million. Other funds came from foundations and corporations and so forth, but $1.5 million came from regular people. And that's what Memphians do in times like this. So that's a certainly short-term change. Long-term change, I'll be interested to see what happens. I think that the Black Lives issue, which we're going to talk about, I think, in a minute, I think that's going to have a longer-term change, or going to create a long-term change in the way people think about their grant dollars. The COVID-19 crisis will certainly be affecting us in the months ahead. And I think that it's going to create a real emphasis, as we have done in our grant making from the fund, to support the safety net agencies, the food banks and the MIFAs, and all of those folks that are on the ground meeting the immediate needs of folks that are hurting. And I think that's going to persist. I think that I'd like to think that we're going to see some transformed institutions as a result. I think that, among other things, we're going to come out of this with a much stronger food bank. We had a great food bank before. We've had a great food bank for a long time. But I think what's going to come out of this is a really dynamic food bank that actually serves counties well outside of Memphis. I don't know how many people know that. Because we have a regional footprint ourselves, we serve West Tennessee, Eastern Arkansas, and Northern Mississippi. And I'm a member of a group of grant makers in Mississippi, oddly enough. But I like to point out to them that the Mid-South Food Bank actually covers more counties in Mississippi than they do in Tennessee. So this is a very much we talk a lot about Memphis, obviously, but these are regional issues and have regional import.
Great. Well, let's take that leap. We really started the conversation around COVID-19, but with the murder of George Floyd and the protests that have erupted in every state and certainly in our city, amongst many others, people are calling for a change and making that plaintive cry. Black Lives Matter, and that we need to see, at the minimum, changes in policing. But people are raising cries about the systemic racism that we all live and breathe. It's just bred into us. So we just thought, we know there's so many roles that philanthropy plays. And as a community foundation, just wanted to gather your thoughts. What are you hearing from the giving community? What are you hearing from the nonprofit community about what our future could look like?
Well, as I have said in some national meetings, Memphis has been very close to these issues for a long time. That doesn't mean that we've always addressed those issues, but the Black Lives issues, the equity issues, have been very much a part of our lives for certainly more than 50 years, dating at least back to the sanitation strike, and obviously well before that. So these are issues that are very close to us. And our demographics are a little bit different than the rest of the country. So we're more a diverse place than most other places. So these are real issues for us, and I think that I think we've always been sensitive to these things, but I don't know that we've always taken the initiative to do something about them. I feel like things are actually going to change with this, and I'll tell you one immediate thing that the Community Foundation has been asked to do. We've been charged by our peers in the philanthropic community to do a survey of charitable giving in Memphis. Well, of philanthropic giving in Memphis. Where are the primary philanthropic institutions investing their dollars? And I suspect we're going to find that a lot of our grant making goes to sort of the usual suspects. And I know that the nonprofit community suspects that as well, that it's if you're a Black-led nonprofit, you have a steeper hill to chase institutional funding than some of the other more traditional mainstream organizations. And we saw that in the COVID-19 crisis as well. My thought as we started into this, we were making grants every week. We wanted immediate impact. And I thought that the best way for that impact would be funding large organizations like the food bank, like MIPA, very, very large institutions that could reach a lot of people in a short period of time. What we found was we can get a lot of impact that way, and they were doing all those great things, but there were a lot of corners in this community that weren't being reached by them. So maybe so there were places like in Raleigh and Fraser, for instance, and in North Memphis, and then out in the rural communities, so that the larger agencies weren't touching. So we ended up in the COVID-19 Regional Response Fund making grants to a lot of little agencies that nobody's ever heard of, but they were reaching 300 and 400 families at a time that weren't seeing the big food drives and those kinds of things. So I think that and a lot of those, by the way, were minority-led agencies, the little tiny agencies in neighborhoods where people with a heart, knew what the needs were and said, I'm going to do something to fix this, and did that, just threw their doors open and started serving people. I think that we're going to be a lot more sensitive to those issues coming from philanthropy going forward. I think that we need to be sensitive to what our staffs look like, what our grantees look like. Are we really meeting the needs on the ground in a way that represents that really represents our community, I suppose? Because I think a lot of the traditional agencies, which we will continue to support as well, don't look that way. And I think that we're going to be a lot more sensitive to those things going forward. I'm not sure what our study is going to look like and say in terms of where philanthropic dollars are going, but I think it's going to turn some heads and change some minds and change the way people are doing things. I'll take half a step back and say one of the things that's troubling me is changes in policing, because we're just starting to talk about that. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I think that a lot of us have thought for a long time that our law enforcement folks were being asked to do things that they weren't really qualified to do, social services and all kinds of things. And the more times you put someone in a law enforcement uniform in situations that they're not particularly attuned to deal with, some not great things can happen. So I think part of this is going to be a community discussion to evaluate what is the best way to address some of these issues.
Bob, let me ask you this. I know Black Lives Matter can be very controversial and it looks like it can be political. How did you straddle that fence and stay in the middle of the road in supporting a cause like this?
Well, I mean, it's just right. It's the right thing to do. Again, I don't think that issues of equity are that foreign to Memphians and Mid-Southerners. I think we know that we're a little bit different from a lot of other places. You can't drive around Memphis without seeing places and people that are hurting. That's what we're certainly big enough, as I've said for a number of times, we're big enough to have world-class problems, but small enough to see them. You can't avoid them. You can't drive around the city without seeing people hurting. Even in the suburbs, there's folks in the suburbs that are exposed to a lot of these same issues. So part of it is we get it, and I think I'm a little troubled. I think that we've kind of known that those issues were there, but maybe thought that somebody else was going to take care of them, and that they would get better. Well, either they would get better on their own, or that's just sort of the way things are, and you sort of justify people hurting, but people are always going to be hurting no matter what you do. I think that we're going to see, at least from the community. I think this is coming up from the community, not down from organized philanthropy, saying we need to actually do something. I think that another thing I've said is we're big enough, we're big enough to have world-class problems, but small enough to actually solve them, or at least make a dent in some of them. And I think that by showing where institutional philanthropy has been making their investments, and sort of dropping the veil on some of those things, there will be more community demand for those resources to be delivered to where they can have the greatest impact and start making real change.
Great. Well, Bob, I just want to end on a personal note. We appreciate your doing this with us, and to get out the word of what the Community Foundation is doing. I think sometimes philanthropy, just the word itself, creates a barrier. But like you said, Memphis is a giving city. And, when we moved here, Mel being a native Memphian, but when we returned, you were one of the people that, you opened the doors of the foundation to us, you met with us, you talked with us, you have, stayed in dialogue with us, and have always, I felt, just exemplified what it means to welcome people to the table. I think as a country, we're having a new conversation. I think the conversation has always been here, but maybe not all parties have been at the table. So we just appreciate your leadership. We want to encourage our listeners to visit the website for the Community Foundation of Greater Memphis. All that information will be posted below, but it's really simple too. It's cfgm.org. And as soon as you get on, there's a whole banner for you to give to the COVID response fund. And as you said, you will be moving into funding of resiliency. So we appreciate your time being here, and we thank our listeners for joining us today. Anything you want to add, Mr. Shaw?
No, Bob is my hero. He can't do any wrong in my eyesight.
Well, you need better glasses, probably.
Listen, here's to all our listeners. We know everybody makes a difference in their community and in their personal lives through what we say and through what we do. So we thank you all for joining us at FUNdraising Good Times. We'll see you soon.